President Biden's announced plans to cancel as much as $20,000 in student debt per borrower to help as many as 40 million people. The president outlined his plan during a speech at the White House Wednesday.
If you make under $125,000, you get $10,000 knocked off your student debt. If you make under $125,000 a year and you received a Pell Grant, you'll get an additional $10,000 knocked off that total, for a total of $20,000 relief. 95% of the borrowers can benefit from these actions. That's 43 million people. Of the 43 million, over 60% are Pell Grant recipients. That's 27 million people who will get $20,000 in debt relief. Nearly 45% can have their student debt fully canceled. That's 20 million people who can start getting on with their lives.
President Biden also announced plans to extend a moratorium on all federal student loan payments through the end of this year. As Biden walked away from the podium, reporters shouted questions. Listen closely.
Mr. President, is this unfair to people who paid their student loans or chose not to take out loans?
Is it fair to people who, in fact, do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses if she want these guys to give them all a tax breaks? Is that fair? What do you think?
Response to Biden's student debt cancellation plan has been mixed. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren said, quote, "Today is a day of joy and relief." Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell condemned Biden's plan as student loan socialism. Meanwhile, NAACP President Erick Johnson has said, quote, "Canceling just $10,000 of debt is like pouring a bucket of ice water on a forest fire," unquote. Many student debtors also say Biden's plan doesn't go far enough. This is the artist and writer Maddie Clifford of the Debt Collective.
And what we're doing with the Debt Collective is really pushing and applying that pressure, because a full cancellation is also like, it's like, oh, you're asking for too much, you're asking for too much. I'm asking to be back at zero. I'm asking for a fair chance, like, to actually build wealth. Like, this isn't, they're always telling us it's not enough. And, you know, 2 years ago, 10K was a ridiculous thing to ask for. And now we've just won it. So what that tells us and what that shows us is that we have to keep fighting.
Those are the words of the artist and writer Maddie Clifford speaking after President Biden unveiled his plan to cancel as much as $20,000 in student debt for millions of borrowers each. In a moment, we'll hear more from Maddie Clifford, who's featured in a short documentary from the Intercept titled Freedom Dreams, Black Women in the Student Debt Crisis. But first, we're joined by Astra Taylor, who co-directed Freedom Dreams. She's also an organizer with the Debt Collective, an organization with its roots in the Occupy Wall Street movement. She wrote the foreword to the Debt Collective's book, Can't Pay, Won't Pay, The Case for Economic Disobedience and Debt Abolition. Astra Taylor, welcome back to Democracy Now! First, respond to President Biden's plan, the executive order yesterday.
Well, it's important to be very clear that the Debt Collective has always fought for full student loan abolition and free public college for all to stop the crisis of student debt at its source. So that is our position. That's what we think needs to happen. But, you know, President Biden did not campaign on that. He was boxed in and forced to campaign promising some debt relief. This proposal he offered yesterday doesn't even meet the full threshold of his campaign promise. Nonetheless, you know, it is a stepping stone for this movement. It's a milestone. So my reactions, you know, are mixed. It's bittersweet because assuming there are some problems in terms of the fact that they are requiring people to fill out applications to get this relief, but assuming people do that, then yes, up to 20 million people can have their balances wiped out. That's absolutely game-changing. We're seeing messages from people, you know, hearing from friends and family that they're crying, that their lives have been changed. But also $10,000 or $20,000 for millions of people doesn't touch the interest that's accrued and capitalized. It won't reduce their monthly payments, and we need to keep fighting for those folks as well, and we will. So mixed reaction, but this is incredibly significant when you think about where we began as a movement not that long ago.
And what do you say to those who say this is bailing out the higher education industrial complex, that they should be lowering their tuitions? They've got together billions of dollars in endowment. Why should they be bailed out?
Well, we're definitely not bailing out the higher education system right now. We're bailing out human beings who've been told for decades that the only path out of poverty is to pursue an education. The United States has substituted, labor policy. We should have been strengthening unions, providing a jobs guarantee, with telling people, hey, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, take out student debt, so that you can then have the credential you need to be employed. The thing is, again, these policies do need to be coupled, debt cancellation plus restructuring the political economy of higher education so that public colleges are actually public again, and that people can go to school and pursue higher education if they want to without the burden of debt. But we're going to have to, fight that fight. So there's often a false opposition in the way people frame this thing. And often people who point out that student debt cancellation doesn't get to the root of the problem have no intention of fighting for the solution, again, which is free public college. But that's what we're going to do. That is the horizon that we at the Debt Collective and a growing coalition of allies are working towards.
Mitch McConnell saying President Biden's student loan socialism is a slap in the face to every family who sacrificed to save for college, every graduate who paid their debt, and every American who chose a certain career path or volunteered to serve in our armed forces in order to avoid taking on debt. Astra?
So cynical. I mean, first off, I am one of the millions of people who did have to pay their debts. I paid it in full. I do not want anyone else to have to suffer just because I did. Social progress means that other people do not have to suffer through something that previous generations did. And the fact is, polling shows that most people have that attitude. Most people are not as selfish and cynical as Mitch McConnell. In fact, student debt cancellation is more popular with people who didn't go to college than people who did, probably because they understand that the costs are rising so fast, they're prohibitive. So this is something people are really celebrating. And of course, let's not forget that, where was this grave concern when when large corporations and millionaires were getting forgivable PPP loans, which on average were worth about $90,000. Where were they when the banks were getting bailed out, right? Where were they when the government was buying billions of dollars of bad corporate debt? So it's just very cynical. And I think you can judge a policy by its enemies. The fact that people like Mitch McConnell, Betsy DeVos, and others are so upset shows you that this is, for once, a form of debt relief that's going to help working class and poor people overwhelmingly.
Astra Taylor, I want to go to your new short documentary for the Intercept, Freedom Dreams, Black Women and the Student Debt Crisis, profiling Black women educators and activists struggling under the weight of tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. It begins with former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner.
Let me give my testimony, if I may, that I am a first-generation college graduate, and I tried to break the cycle of poverty in my family's line. Everybody has a hope and a dream for better. And that, because you decided to go and advance yourself through higher education, should not happen in this country, no how, no way.
Student debt punishes poor and working class people for pursuing higher education, ensnarling individuals and entire communities in compounding interest and fees. Today, student debt is a nearly $2 trillion weight, crushing 45 million people, with women and especially Black women disproportionately burdened. Student debt is a trap, and it is also a teacher. Debt teaches us that education is a commodity, that we need to choose degrees and careers based on pay, that we are alone in our financial struggles, that we don't deserve to be free.
I owe owe over $120,000 in debt, and I didn't talk about it, and anytime I did, I automatically felt ashamed.
I am probably about $80,000 in debt, and up until recently, I think my word was shame too, but while you were talking, Maddie, I was actually like, it's regret.
I decided to go to college because I'm a nerd. I love education, I love school, and I thought to myself, well, it doesn't matter how much it costs, it's going to pay off.
I had to go to school. I'm from a family of educators. They were the first generation in their family, in our family. So it's you have the opportunity, you're going to college.
I was really adamant on moving towards my career goals. And so I just pushed myself into this master's program without thinking, how am I gonna pay for it?
A lack of intergenerational wealth and other structural inequities force women, and Black women in particular, to borrow at disproportionate rates. And wage discrimination makes it that much harder to escape. For every dollar white men make, Black women earn 61 cents, a lifetime loss of almost $1 million.
We've been, told working class people that as long as you get an education, then you will have job prospects, you'll be able to take care of your family, you'll be able to have a future. I really used to blame myself a lot, and I used to feel a lot of shame, and then I started to look at the policies, and I'm like, wait a second, is it personal responsibility, or is it really bad policy? And I realized it's bad policy, straight up.
The inaccessibility to higher education is preventing us from being able to take care of our families. The inaccessibility to higher education is keeping us in poverty.
Student loan debt was never explained to me. There was never a person that sat down and said, hey, here's how you're gonna pay for college.
That means over time, we're growing further and further in debt due to these inequitable systems.
I originally borrowed $203,000, and that balance has since grown to $238,000. I loved being in the classroom, but teachers just do not make enough money to survive in LA. Ended up with a master's degree and then a doctorate, and then I became a principal, which is pretty much the highest position you can be at a school, and I'm still not making enough money to pay my student loan debt balance. I feel stuck between a rock and a hard place when I'm talking to my students about their plans for their post-secondary education goals. I'm teaching them to navigate the system in a way that I wasn't taught, but I'm still fearful for them, and there's days that I'm just filled with regret. That balance doesn't leave. That $238,000, it's there with me every second of every single day. You go work for these high-tech companies, you can make $250,000, $300,000 and not have to worry about how you're gonna pay back this debt. I could have done that. I'm smart, I could have done that. But I took on this commitment to become an educator, and I'm being penalized for it.
Actually, the roots of the student debt crisis started in California. Yeah, it started around the time of the 60s and 70s when people were becoming really revolutionary. I mean, the Black Panthers were going to college, more women were going to college, and at the time, college was actually free in California.
In 1966, Ronald Reagan, the newly elected governor of California, burnished his image by attacking the anti-war and racial justice movements taking root on university campuses. He proposed rolling back California's program of free public college and charging tuition. Taxpayers, Reagan said, should not be subsidizing intellectual curiosity.
We have been and are providing a premium service, an education superior to most and equal to the best. So far, those receiving this education have not been required to share in the cost.
When Black and brown people started going to college in California, that's when you see public education fall away. So the burden of paying for education was placed on families.
I feel like this is another way to block access to education. Our grandparents are coming off of integration. So we running up in those schools, Black people, we're gonna get our education. But now we still got this debt though.
Anything less than full debt cancellation is a loss, especially for the most marginalized. How much debt do you have? You wanna?
We gonna talk about this? Okay, yeah, I'm not ashamed. So let's talk about it. I have $250K in student loan debt. I am a PhD and I'm now working, and I told you I was working at Harvard, and I'm part-time, I'm differently abled, so it took me 8 years to get out of my undergrad because I wasn't well. And so the only path for me at that moment, which is I had to take a whole bunch of loans.
For me personally, $230,000 worth of student loan debt means that I can't purchase a home.
I was sold a myth in society that once I got my PhD, then I would be able to have upward mobility, that the access to generational wealth would open up for me. Upward mobility, that is a misnomer. Is that the word?
Yeah, that works. That works.
Upward mobility.
It's a lie.
That's a lie. So this idea of good debt and bad debt, you just brought up homes. That good debt, we don't even have access.
We can't even get there.
We can't even get the good debt. We can sure get some bad debt real quick though. Debt impedes our ability to dream, and I see that in my students. I wanted to be the educator that told the truth and the educator that unlocked dreams. If this system was no longer what we see right now, and we were able to not only imagine and envision something different, but we were actually able to embody it and do it, like, what does that look like? So a system where Black women do not have to be subject to crushing debt is a system that would benefit everyone.
An excerpt of the Intercept short documentary Freedom Dreams, Black Women in the Student Debt Crisis, narrated by former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, co-directed by Astra Taylor, who we're speaking to today, organizer with the Debt Collective. So looking at a chart from the Department of Education, the percent of fourth-year undergraduate students aged 18 to 24 with student loan debt by race, African Americans, 90%, Latinos 72%, whites 66%, Asian Americans 51%. Where do you go from here after the partial debt forgiveness that President Biden issued by executive order yesterday, Astra?
We're going to keep fighting. The Debt Collective has been sounding the alarm about student debt and organizing on the basis that our debts are actually a source of power when we get organized. Individually, they can overwhelm us, but when we come together, we can use our debts as leverage to demand change. And we have done that stepping stone by stepping stone, beginning with our campaign with former Corinthian students. They were students who had been defrauded by the predatory for-profit chain. They launched a debt strike coupled with a creative legal strategy. We just won them earlier in the year, after 7 long years, full automatic cancellation for over 500,000 people. We built on that. After they went on strike, students from ITT Tech, another predatory college, they just won $4 billion of cancellation. And then this announcement from President Biden that debt would be broadly canceled, for tens of millions of Americans. So we've been building through strategy, through strategizing, and through creating solidarity among debtors, not letting us be divided and conquered. And so we're going to keep doing that. There's actually a debt strike launching because they have extended the payment pause, the payment moratorium, until January 1st. So thousands of people are saying, we can't pay, we're never going to pay. This cannot be the final extension of the payment pause. We have a growing number of debtors joining the movement, including a growing number of older debtors who are suffering under these enormous 6-figure burdens. Older people are often left out of the debate. It's actually the fastest growing demographic of student debtors. So we've launched a 50 over 50 debt strike that is already in the hundreds now, just in a matter of days. So the fight's going to keep going. And we're going to continue also our work on medical debt, back rent, and bail debt until we can win a society where people are not forced into debt just to survive.